Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading. Then we examine a single relevant question that passage points us to. Today I'm joined by Sheryl, Daughety, and we're looking at a passage from Genesis chapter 47. Joseph has made Pharaoh wealthy. So when the famine struck, the first year people were able to buy food with money. The famine was so severe that by the second year, there's no money left, and Pharaoh, through Joseph, had collected it all. So the second year, Joseph bartered or offered to barter grain for farm animals. It's unlikely that the animals were left in Egypt with Pharaoh, but that would have made because that would have made farming impossible. The animals simply became the property of Pharaoh. And in the third year of the famine, when money and livestock had been placed in Pharaoh's possession, the people were left to offer themselves and their land in exchange for grain. And while most English translations state that Pharaoh made slaves out of the people, this was actually more like the serf in a feudal system. The people worked the land and kept the majority of the harvest for themselves, but Pharaoh owned the land, and 20% of the harvest was given to them and given to him in perpetuity as a tax. Proverbs 29:2 says, when the godly are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked are in power, they groan. This is certainly an example of compassionate rulership, the compassionate rulership of a righteous man. Joseph exhibits characteristics of compassionate leadership. It is also interesting to note that the system of economy that Joseph created is a dangerous one from our perspective, like the Western culture. But even a feudal socialist system would operate for the blessing of people if the righteous rule. It's also noteworthy that a free capitalist society or any other economic system of government was going to break down without righteous rulership. And there's this great need for righteous rulership in societies. There are many who look to government, presidents, programs, economic plans for some sort of relief and deliverance, and we must pray for righteous rulership regardless of the system of government. Psalm 20:7 says, some nations boast of their chariots and horses, but we boast in the name of the Lord our God. We should also pray for other countries with the recognition that God can move even within the boundaries of oppressive governments to bring about his honor and glory. So Joseph had created a completely different, as a matter of fact, most government economic systems in Scripture do not look like ours. Mm-hmm. Does that bother you? Do you think he was misguided? Are there any concerns about that?
You mean about the system that he created under these circumstances? Mm-hmm. No, because when I think about it on a whole, he created a system in which people could earn what they needed, and nobody was going to be put in a position where they could not be fed, where one person was going to be considered more important or more worthy than another one. And it's a system that no one had to depend on somebody's goodwill or compassion or what mood they were in that day. They knew that they'd be able to get fed one way or another. And this might be an unpopular point of view, but I also think that he created a system in which people could maintain a certain amount of dignity.
Right.
Right? Because I don't know about you, but some of the most hardworking people I know are people who have the hardest time to accept anything that they would consider charity. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it has so much to do with pride as it does the fact that they want to feel like they earn it.
Right.
And that they were able to provide for themselves. I mean, I guess some of that could be pride, but I'm not promoting that we not be compassionate and have goodwill, because I believe that we all understand that we should do that. But I do think at the same time it's dangerous to create a system where people no longer have to do anything to take care of themselves.
Right.
Where nothing is any longer expected of them, because if we as Christians should understand anything, it should be that we have sinful natures and we need to be busy doing the right things, not left with tons of time to just get stuck in all our own devices.
The year before last, we made a constitutional change here at the church. So there, at the time when we made it, so that's a year and a half ago, we were probably between the two campuses averaging 550 total, maybe 600, maybe. But the annual business meeting that we would have, which approves the budget, and the elders and the deacons, had very low attendance. And there would be, I for example, we borrowed $1.7 million. And as a matter of fact, that business meeting, now that I think about it, it may have been the year before, we approved borrowing $2 million to build the Bertie campus or something to that effect. And there may have been 30 people in the room. So 5% of those people who were attending were encumbering the whole church with debt. That's not that big of a deal. One of the reasons why it's so low attended sometimes is because people do trust the leadership, and they believe they're taken in the right direction. So they don't feel the need to have additional input. The problem, though, becomes when you don't have godly leadership, when you don't have integrity at the top.
Decisions that could get made.
That's right, exactly. That, create havoc for years, and I know of some of those situations, not here, but in other places.
Yeah, me too.
And the churches are still suffering from them. And so we made a change that required at least a certain number of deacons, elders, and staff to have voted for the measure to pass. And that was done to try to bring some protection. You never want an ungodly leader, an unrighteous leader leading a church, but it happens. It happens more than we want to, believe. And, I'm thinking right this moment of a particular situation. It wasn't a national news situation because the church wasn't that big. It was a church of 600 or 800, but the pastor had borrowed $1.2 million in the church's name, and he signed it, and the church secretary signed it, of which he gave her $100,000. He used $900,000 himself personally, and then they left $200,000 at the church. Never ask anybody, and so he gets in trouble, has to leave, but the church is still responsible for that debt, right? You can see this in countries, Haiti, for example, is a prime example in our hemisphere of unrighteous leadership that keeps people suffering because of their oppression. And I'm a firm believer that the form of government isn't nearly as critical as the righteousness of the person at the top. And I don't know that there are very many people, even in our nation, that have been at the top that we would consider righteous, right? But you certainly want them to have some kind of leaning in that direction. So that takes me to the question, why is it that people are so quick to trust in a human leader rather than depending on God?
I can't help but wonder if it's because we know that those people have access to resources that we think are going to solve some problems for us, which are normally immediate problems. So that could be, money, as in that they feel like that person could make sure that people's wages get raised, or that we're not paying as much for gas or insurance or taxes, whatever the case may be. It could be access to different things like food, insurance. I think it could go on, but I think a lot of that stuff that feels really immediate to us and would feel like such a relief if that part of our life could change a little bit, makes it easy for us to feel that we could depend on or look to that person to help us with whatever that is that would make us feel better. But as you know, God doesn't often work in that way because the changes that he tends to bring about in our lives, it's not to say that they can't be sudden changes, because I do believe they can be, but I also think that the lasting things that happen in our life are processes that he walks us through that are hard, and it's work that we typically don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's much easier for us to say, well, this person can bring me a little bit of change. It's going to make me more comfortable. I'm not going to have to do this hard work that God's asking me to do to see real lasting change happen in my life. But this human person, this leader, can't bring you peace and joy and salvation like God can either.
That's right.
But I think we do typically want the fastest, easiest choice.
Yeah, God chooses to use human leadership. That is the reality of it. But we often attach ourselves way too closely to the success or failure of a particular person.
In their opinion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they say things that appeal to us. There's an old adage in sales training that I've heard lots of times. It says, when everything else is equal, the person is going to buy from the person they like. But given things being unequal, they're still going to do business with the person that they like. And I see that in politics and leaders. We're going to pick a side, and typically it's the one that appeals to us, the most. But even when they do things, right, this is a phenomenon that I have seen play out in
I know what you're about to say.
Horrible ways the last number of years. When everything isn't equal, we will identify with a person. And I think last week's podcast, one of the days ended up being on politics and how that played out in that particular scripture. But one of the things that I find most disturbing in the church today is we're unwilling to call out things that are wrong once we've identified with a particular person, right? But some of the things they do need to be called out. We should have enough integrity to say, I support this person because they are going to do A, B, C, but I don't like who they are as a human being. I think they're corrupt. I think they're evil, whatever the words, whatever word we want to use, but we can't do that. It's like you have one that is dating, and you got another one that might date at some point in the future. When they make a bad choice, right, with a boyfriend or girlfriend, this is my experience. They may know you're right when you point things out, but they're going to argue with you and dispute with you because they're so tied to their choice, right? It becomes personal for them. And I think when we get to those spots, I've seen that play out. People become so attached to a person that they can't acknowledge this is wrong, or this is sin, or this is bad.
Yeah.
And it does disqualify them as a leader, whether that's as a president or a pastor. And our emotions become so tied to it. We don't want somebody to tell us we were wrong, right?
Yeah.
I was that way over girlfriends. My daddy was always wrong. He wasn't, but at the moment he was.
You wanted to believe he was anyway. And, I think particularly we see that play out in politics, because I can think of a couple of conversations I've had with people who I consider friends and that I really trusted, and I trust their opinions on a lot of things, but they would begin to talk about politics and who they, just 100% believed in. And I would say, but what about this? And what about that? And I'm not saying don't support, but supporting and 100% falling for it all. Just, I don't know. I don't, that part to me is hard. that's a hard spot to get to, because you have to be blind to a lot of things.
Right. Given the choice between Judas and Satan, I'm probably choosing Judas.
Right. But it doesn't mean
But I don't mean I can't talk about Judas and who he is, right?
Yes.
I can't make Judas out to be Jesus.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's what I'm saying.
And that's what people do, right? Mm-hmm. We become so attached to that person. That's why we get deceived.
Yeah.
We can't be rational about it. That this is a bad idea. We're going down the wrong path.
That's in my mind, you're falling too far on the side of your emotions and your affection.
Yeah.
Than you are reality and reasoning.
I would agree. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around the book of Genesis.